Hey everybody, this is Vince Miller. Thank you so much for joining me for another devotional. Today we're going to be in John chapter 7. I'm going to read verse 2, which is a bit of a marker on where we're at in the story of Jesus. John writes, "Now the Jews' feast of the booths was at hand." So what's the Feast of Booths? Well, each year, Jews celebrated three very significant events that required them to take a trip to Jerusalem. They were the Passover, Pentecost, and this one right here, the Feast of Booths. Sometimes it's called the Feast of the Tabernacles. And each of these events were very significant to followers of God. They served as a reminder to men and their families about something significant that God did in their past. They were the way that they passed on history and stories of God's salvation. Now, here's what would happen at this feast. Men first would gather up a bunch of supplies to build a booth. And a booth was kind of simply a square structure that kind of represented a tent. And then they would make their way up to Jerusalem, because Jerusalem was on a mountain, for this week-long or 8-day event. Once they got there, they would build their tents or their booths or their tabernacles, which reminded them of the 40 years that they wandered in the wilderness with God. Then the priests would light on the temple grounds for 8 days candles all over the temple. Now, these candles were like these large and very magnificent oil-burning candles that burned so brightly and hot that it would light the sky for miles and miles around. Some say it burned so hot that you could actually feel the heat emanate off of it all over the city, which reminded them of what? It reminded them of God's leading by a pillar of fire at night all throughout the wilderness. Honestly, I would love to see one of these events as they happened in their time. I bet it was incredible to see millions of people making a pilgrimage up to Jerusalem, packing into a city, and then building booths all over it, seeing the glow of light by night. And all of this was done for one reason: to remind God's people of his provision and salvation to them. Now, fellas, I think we need to set aside time like this every year. Time to remove ourselves from the monotony of everyday life. Time to remember God and his provision over the previous year and years. Time to even reset spiritual priorities that have been lost over the year. Time to repent and turn from disobedience back toward obedience. Time to refocus and recenter on God. And fellas, if you haven't done this in a while, you need to do it. You need to do it. The best way is in a guided retreat with other brothers who need the same. Fellas, I do this every year. It has been one of life's most valuable tools for my spiritual growth. But here's the deal. It's not going to happen unless you take the step to plan it. You have to put it on your calendar, which is exactly what God made his people do too. He made them do it 3 times, by the way. I'm only asking you to do it once. So get a date on the calendar, fellas. I love you. I pray this blesses you. If it has, share it with someone else, and I'll see you right back here again tomorrow.